Have you been struggling to read the Bible consistently, to understand, to get into it, to know what you're reading and know how it applies to your life today? I got you. We are going through the book of Acts, chapter by chapter, so come on in and join me. Hey y'all, I'm Kaela. Welcome back to my channel. We are still in the book of Acts, and we're in chapter 25, which means we only have 4 left. 4 chapters to go in the book of Acts, and I'll be honest, there's no way that I could stop doing this. There's no way that I could stop sharing what has happened and what God has done through me. Just sitting here reading the Bible, thinking maybe 100 people would want to read with me. What God has done and the growth that you've experienced, it would be wrong and selfish and insensitive and disobedient, quite frankly, for me to stop. So I'm seeking the Lord for where to next, but we will continue. Okay, just let me just put that there. We will continue. So let's continue on right now in the book of Acts, because we're in this with Paul, and we are now in chapter 25. Okay, so you can still grab your workbook. It's going to be here at any time. Anytime you need it, the link is always in the description for you to be able to grab that. But let's get into chapter 25, because I feel like every chapter right now, we're like left on a cliffhanger. Like we don't want to stop reading, so much so that in the last chapter, I already started to read 25. So pause me if you haven't read it. I kind of think you may have already read it if you couldn't stop like I couldn't yesterday. So let's pause and read it, and then let's come back and talk about it. Okay, remember, after 2 years of this, then Festus comes. So chapter 25, verse 1. 3 days after Festus arrived in Caesarea to take over his new responsibilities, he left for Jerusalem. Why would he, 3 days after he gets there to take over, why would he leave for Jerusalem? Do you think it had anything to do with like pleasing the Jewish people? Like how that's just kind of been a thing? Did Felix tell him, hey, these are the people who actually run things around here? Like this is who you want to make sure that you're pleasing and doing what they say? Or maybe he's just going to meet them. So he left for Jerusalem, where the leading priests and other Jewish leaders met with him and made their accusations against Paul. This is 2 years later, at least 2 years later. And they meet with him to talk about Paul. Like nothing else has happened since then. No one else has come forward since then. It hasn't been an issue. Like they're still stuck on Paul. It makes me wonder, in these 2 years, like where have all the believers, have they gone back to Jerusalem? Have they, have there been any Jewish converts into the way, like believers in this last 2 years? Because although Paul's in prison for these 2 years, or not necessarily prison, but they kept him in the fortress, right? So although Paul's there for 2 years, like his followers, I mean, we're not hearing about Silas and John Mark and Barnabas. Like we're not hearing about them anymore, but I don't imagine they're just sitting around, right? They have an assignment from the Lord too. So they get there. They asked Festus as a favor to transfer Paul to Jerusalem, planning to ambush and kill him along the way, obviously. They asked, by the way, I'm sure those people have eaten by now, right? Okay, so they asked Festus as a favor. So does this show us kind of like the Jewish people in Jerusalem and then the governor, like what kind of relationship is the fact that they think they can ask a favor? Come on. But Festus replied that Paul was at Caesarea and he himself would be returning there soon. So he said, those of you in authority can return with me. If Paul has done anything wrong, you can make your accusations. Sounds like Festus is going to be a good guy, yeah? About 8 or 10 days later, Festus returned to Caesarea, and on the following day, he took his seat in court and ordered that Paul be brought in. I wonder where Paul really was staying all this time. Like it said that he was at the fortress and they gave him these freedoms and stuff, but where was he actually staying for 2 years? Who was feeding him? Like, was it believers that would come and feed him and come and take care of him? Or was he taken care of as a prisoner? Where was he for these 2 years? When Paul arrived, the Jewish leaders from Jerusalem gathered around and made many serious accusations they couldn't prove. We already knew that was coming, right? They made many serious accusations they couldn't prove. Paul denied the charges. I am not guilty of any crime against the Jewish laws or the temple or the Roman government, he said. I wonder who like if the believers, or if Paul in all this time, if they wrote letters to someone, if they tried to get someone else on their side. Like, I wonder if this was a constant thing, or if Paul was just like, hey, like, it is what it is. This is where I'm at. You continue on with your mission. I'm good right here. This is what I expected. You know, I knew that I was going to have to suffer. So you keep going on with your mission. Then Festus, wanting to please the Jews, asked him, are you willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there? Oh. But Paul replied, no, this is the official Roman court. Remember, Paul's a Roman citizen by birth. Paul replied, no, this is the official Roman court. So I ought to be tried right here. You know very well I'm not guilty of harming the Jews. Of harming the Jews? Was there talk about harm? Like, this can't be physical harm. So what kind of harm have they said that he has done? Like the riots and all that stuff. If I have done something worthy of death, I don't refuse to die. But I'm innocent. No one has a right to turn me over to these men to kill me. I appeal to Caesar. Well, now we've got to know their historical culture and the way their governments ran. Because remember, Paul was in front of the Roman officer and he was like, I appeal to the governor. So they send him up to the governor, and that's where he is now. And he's like, I appeal to Caesar. So how often did someone like try to go up the ranks? And do they have to approve it right away? Let's keep reading. Festus conferred with his advisors and then replied, very well. You have appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar you will go. Okay, who's Caesar? Like, what level of reign does he have in the country? And does he have a relationship with the Jews as well? Like, how is it government and religious people, how are they working together? And is it a mess? And does it make us understand a little bit of our time too? Let's keep going. Chapter 13. A few days later, King Agrippa arrived with his sister Bernice to pay their respects to Festus. King Herod Agrippa. We just read about him, and we've read about him before. So now there's the king is with the governor to pay his respects to the new governor. A few days later, King Agrippa arrived with his sister Bernice to pay their respects to Festus. During their stay of several days, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. There's a prisoner here, he told him, whose case was left for me by Felix. When I was in Jerusalem, the leading priests and Jewish elders pressed charges against him and asked me to condemn him. I pointed out to them that Roman law doesn't convict people without a trial. They must be given an opportunity to confront their accusers and defend themselves. So, Roman law. So even though the Jewish leaders and the leading priests and the high priests, remember way back when we were like, who has the authority to arrest people and stuff? But he's talking about Roman law now. Paul's a Roman citizen, the Roman law. While his accusers came here for the trial, I didn't delay. I called the case the very next day and ordered Paul brought in. But the accusations made against him weren't any of the crimes I expected. I wonder what he did expect, right? For how bad they were saying it was and that they wanted, hey, try him here so we can kill him. I wonder how bad he thought it was. Instead, it was something about their religion and a dead man named Jesus, who Paul insists is alive. This is what he's saying. So clearly, Festus hasn't heard the gospel yet. Festus hasn't spent enough time with Paul for Paul to speak about Jesus yet. Because he says, instead, it was something about their religion and a dead man named Jesus who Paul insists is alive. Like, imagine Festus in this moment, right? He's the governor. He's supposed to try this case. This is the issue. And he doesn't even know who Jesus is. So he doesn't know that this is the Messiah, that it's a big deal to them, that it's the truth, like all this stuff. He's just like, Paul says this guy's alive and they don't. Like, that's what I'm here to try a case for. I was at a loss to know how to investigate these things, so I asked him whether he would be willing to stand trial on these charges in Jerusalem. But Paul appealed to have his case decided by the emperor. Okay, so Caesar, the emperor. So I ordered that he be held in custody until I could arrange to send him to Caesar. I'd like to hear the man for myself, Agrippa said. And Festus replied, you will, tomorrow. So now King Herod's involved too. But hadn't they met Paul before? Didn't he know who he was before? So the next day, Agrippa and Bernice, his sister, right? Was it his sister or his wife? Yeah, his sister, arrived at the auditorium with great pomp, accompanied by military officials and prominent men of the city. Festus ordered that Paul be brought in. Then Festus said, King Agrippa and all who are here, this is the man whose death is demanded by all the Jews, both here and in Jerusalem. That's weird. I thought they just wanted him, well, I guess they did want him killed, but whose death is demanded. They did say, kill him, kill him. I was just thinking they wanted him arrested. They wanted him taken out, but no. They're saying we need to charge him with this and kill him. His death is demanded. But in my opinion, he has done nothing deserving death. However, since he appealed his case to the emperor, I have decided to send him to Rome. Remember I was telling you how the book of Acts changed my life in 2021? We're getting there because it was chapter 28 that really hit me. But do you remember back when a couple chapters ago when it's chapter 23, verse 11, when the Lord appeared to Paul and said, be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well. And Paul's like in prison, he's being falsely accused, he's all of these things, but God said Rome. So he knows that it can't be the end, right? There's got to be more to the story because God said he must preach in Rome. And I remember reading this right here. I have decided to send him to Rome. Now, it may not be the circumstances that sometimes we think, but he's going to Rome. He's going to Rome, which is where God said he would go. So I want you to think about a moment in your life and maybe truly examine yourself and like how you have had plans set out in your life, but that God has actually still kept his word. That God actually did what he said he would do, that promise that he made, that what you thought you heard him saying actually did come true, just not in the way that you expected it. And we've got to be able to see God moving. We've got to be able to see his plan. Something I say all the time is God has a plan. That plan is always in motion and you are part of that plan. So like for here, God said to Paul, hey, you're going to go preach the gospel in Rome as well. While Paul is like thrown in prison, it's been years and now he's going to Rome. He's going to Rome to appeal to Caesar and he's still technically a prisoner. But he's going to Rome. God said he would go to Rome and he's going to Rome. And I just want to challenge you to like look at your life and look at situations in your life and where you thought God was going to take you and what you thought God was going to do and what you thought you heard for him to do in your life, and that he's actually kept his word. It just didn't come in the way that you thought it was going to come, or it didn't happen as fast as you thought it was going to happen. Remember, this is a couple chapters, but this is years since God told Paul he would go to Rome. And he spent years in that same prison fortress until this moment that he's now going to go to Rome. But he's not going to go to Rome just to preach the gospel. He's going to Rome as a prisoner to appeal to Caesar. Okay, but think about these things within yourself and within your own life. But what shall I write the emperor? This is Festus talking, right? Because clearly back then they wrote letters to send off with them. We read a couple of them already. But what shall I write the emperor? For there's no clear charge against him. So I've brought him before all of you, and especially you, King Agrippa, so that after we examine him, I might have something to write. For it makes no sense to send a prisoner to the emperor without specifying the charges against him. Let's put ourselves there in that day, right? Or even let's modernize it to now. You want to send someone up to the governor, to the mayor, to the president, to the prime minister. Let's hit all the countries here. You want to send someone up there, but you don't have a reason, like you don't know how to explain why you're sending them. He has to have a reason. He's got to write this letter. He's got to say like, this is the reason why he appealed to Caesar and this is why I'm sending to you. Otherwise, Caesar's going to be like, why didn't you just handle it? Why are you troubling me? I got bigger things to do. So he needs help writing this letter, and he's asking King Agrippa to help him. So he says like, here it is, Paul again, falsely accused. Like no one, just this runaround. again, that's the end of the chapter. But just this runaround of like, you didn't do anything. No one can, they're accusing you, but no one can prove that you've broken any laws. No one can prove, and so much so that no one even wants to try your case. It just keeps getting pushed around and around and around and around. But now he's going to Rome. Like now he's going to Rome. God said he would go to Rome, and he's about to go to Rome. They are about to send him to Rome. I'm telling you, I don't want to stop. Keep reading. Keep going. Keep digging into yourself. Sometimes the best thing we can do is see how God interacts with people. And sometimes it's easier for us to see it as like a third party looking in and see how God interacted with people. And then look at how God interacts with us and know that he's the same God. God said to Paul, you're going to go to Rome. It took a long time. Paul went through a lot. He's been false accused, and he's not going there the way that he maybe thought he was going to go there or the way that we expected. But he's going to Rome. He's going to Rome. All right, let me give you your walk it out challenge for today. For chapter 25. If I were to stand before the Lord today, and he were to ask me what I've done in the past 30 days to spread the good news, what would my response be? Remember, this isn't about preaching. Today, examine yourself and your days. With what you do, where you go, who you see, look for opportunities to share the goodness of God. This isn't about preaching. This isn't about getting up on a stage with a microphone. This isn't about being in a church even. It's your life where you are. Paul was in prison, sharing with the guards, I'm sure, sharing with, they bring him in, sharing with the governors. Like wherever you are, wherever God has you, that's where you share. How can you share with the coworker in the cubicle beside you? How can you share with the Uber driver that picks you up? How can you share the goodness of God? The goodness of God. How can you share with others? If I were to stand before the Lord today and he were to ask me what I've done in the past 30 days to spread the good news, what would my response be? Let me pray over you before we go. God, I thank you. I worship you. And God, we desire to share your good news, to not keep it in for ourselves, but to share with others, to share with the world. We have received your mercy, your grace, your forgiveness. We have received salvation and eternal life. How dare we keep it in? God, help us today. Help us today with boldness and open our eyes to opportunities to share your goodness, with the world. God, I pray over the one watching right now. I pray that their eyes will be so opened that they will begin to see opportunities that never popped out to them before, that you will begin to show them people who they pass every single day that they have never considered before, people who are hungry for your goodness, people who are seeking your mercy and your grace. God, show them today. Reveal to them who it is and give them the words, the smile, the touch, the encouragement to share your goodness with others, all for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.